I never imagined the day would come when a voicemail from my own daughter would mark the moment I stopped being her mother and started being her rival. Her voice sliced through the message like a knife. "I wish you'd never been my mom, you worthless woman." Then just like that, blocked. No warning, no reason. A single text notification and then silence. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. My daughter, Emily, 39 years old, mother of two, my only child. I sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at the glowing screen. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Instead, there was this cold, empty space inside me, like a canyon had cracked wide open. I didn't answer her. There was nothing left worth saying. Instead, I pulled open the filing cabinet. I knew right where the papers were. Front folder marked in red, Maplewood Estates, transfer of title 2019. And right beneath it, the BMW paperwork. Both in my name, always had been. That was the smartest move I'd made before I let her back into my life. She thought those things were hers, acted like I owed them to her. 5 hours later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, no longer a mother trying to protect her child, but a client cutting ties. Michael Turner looked up from the documents and asked softly, "Linda, are you absolutely sure?" I didn't even pause. Sell it all, the house, the car. Cash out and end this mess. By 7 that evening, the Maplewood Estates listing was already live, a shiny little coming soon badge glowing above the photos I'd staged myself. The car, too, parked in front of my hydrangeas, had already been claimed by a dealership willing to pay above market. Everything was set in motion. I told no one. No angry phone calls, no cryptic Facebook posts, just silence. That night, I sat in my new apartment above the garden center. The air smelled faintly of soil and lavender. Smaller, yes, but every single key on the hook belonged to me. Emily had crossed a line she could never uncross. And this time I had no plans to clean up the wreckage she left behind. 6 months earlier, she'd shown up at my door like she still lived there. It was raining. Always raining when she needed something. Emily stood on the porch in yoga pants, dragging a pink suitcase behind her, latte in hand like it was part of her outfit. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice quick and breezy, the way she sounded when she didn't want to explain too much. "My lease fell through. Total disaster. Just for a month, I promise." And of course I stepped aside. Always did. At first, it felt nice having the house full again. I cooked too much, like I always do when I'm nervous. She brought the girls one weekend, then left early, mumbling something about needing to recharge. I didn't ask. I was scared of the answers. That month passed with no mention of leaving. She called it staying a little longer. Then a few weeks later, her car supposedly broke down. She'd had her eye on my BMW since the day I bought it. "You don't drive that much anymore," she said. "Just until I get financing approved." That was over a year ago. Rent never came. Not once. Grocery bills doubled, then tripled. She started ordering meal kits on my credit card and called it convenience. Boxes piled on the porch. Receipts for designer shoes, spa days, even some retreat she claimed was for networking. Those ended up in my trash. She painted herself as stressed, overworked, always on the edge of something big. "You don't understand, Mom," she'd say, waving her phone around. "Everything's different now. It's not like when you were working." And slowly I felt like a stranger in my own home. She moved my furniture, switched out my curtains, replaced family photos with digital frames full of her own life. When I finally tried to talk about her moving out, she just laughed. "You can't be serious. Where would I even go?" That's what she said when I told her it was time to move out. And right then it hit me, she had never planned on leaving. Not once. She hadn't come back because she needed help, she'd come back because she saw an opening. And I was the one who had unlocked the door. Emily never yelled, she didn't have to. Her weapons were smaller, quieter, eye rolls, heavy sighs, that tired voice she used when she'd say, "Mom, you just don't get it." If I asked about the car insurance I'd covered again, she'd blink at me like I was being ridiculous. It's temporary, chill. But temporary stretched into months. She moved my coffee machine. She took over the garage. She swapped out my dining chairs without even asking because apparently they were outdated. One afternoon I came home from physical therapy, slid my key into the lock, and it didn't work. She changed the locks. "Security thing," she mumbled, barely glancing up. I thought I mentioned it, she hadn't. He treated my house like a hotel. My kitchen wasn't mine anymore. It was her workstation, her podcast studio, her meal prep station. One time I asked her to move her delivery boxes out of the hallway. She laughed. It's called modern living, Mom. She'd try it. But then came the moment that stripped away every excuse I'd made for her. I was walking past her bedroom, arms full of laundry, when I heard her voice. Too loud, too confident. She doesn't even know it yet, she said. Once I get that house in my name, she can rot in some senior complex off the freeway. No pause. No hesitation. Just the truth laid out like it was already done. I didn't drop the laundry. I didn't confront her. I just stood there, letting every word settle into me. That night, I unlocked the drawer in my bedroom and pulled out the trust documents. I read every line, then read them again. The clauses about misuse, abandonment, revocation rights. All valid. All mine. He thought I was weak. She thought I'd grow old into silence. What she forgot was that I'd spent 30 years building legal protections for people who were too worn out to fight. This time I was the one with the net and she was walking right into it. The night after that phone call, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the trust binder open beside me, every clause highlighted, every amendment reviewed. I wasn't just studying legal language, I was remembering who I used to be. Before retirement. Before widowhood. Before motherhood swallowed me whole. For 32 years, I had protected other families' estates from greedy relatives, from lawsuits, divorces, addictions, entitlement. I had built inheritances to survive storms. I knew every loophole Emily hoped I'd miss, because I was the one who used to close them. She thought the house and the car were hers. What she didn't know was that both were tucked into a living trust after my husband died. My name. My control. With clauses for revocation in cases of neglect, coercion, or abuse. Clauses she'd managed to satisfy a dozen times over without even trying. I'd saved everything. Every text, every voicemail where she made excuses instead of rent payments, every Amazon receipt that hit my card. I had a folder labeled Emily Residency, time-stamped and backed up in 3 separate places. She never signed a lease. She never contributed in any traceable way. She was a guest. Nothing more. And legally, that was all that mattered. In the morning, I called Michael Turner, an old colleague, the only person I trusted with something this close to home. We hadn't spoken in months. Michael, it's Linda, I said. I need to initiate a recall on a property and a vehicle. Everything's still in trust. I've reviewed the terms. That's what I told him. Michael paused, then asked gently, "Are you ready for this?" "No, of course not." But readiness didn't matter. Sometimes it isn't about being ready, it's about doing what has to be done. By noon I was on his calendar. By dinner I had already drafted my action plan. Quiet. Careful. Airtight. Emily had made the mistake of thinking she could handle me, manage me like one of her chores. But I'd been preparing for this moment since the day she wheeled that suitcase back into my life. Michael hadn't changed much. Same crisp shirt, same calm tone that used to comfort couples as they signed wills they barely understood. Only this time he wasn't talking to strangers. He was staring at me like I'd just dropped a grenade on his desk tied up with ribbon. He flipped slowly through the trust papers. "Linda, you structured this yourself?" "Yes," I told him. "I set it up after Robert passed. I didn't want the house tied up in probate if something ever happened to me." I leaned in. "But I also added full recall authority." "And the car?" he asked. "Same trust. One asset portfolio, all under my control." He nodded. "It's airtight. She's not a tenant, not a co-owner, and she never signed a thing giving her rights." "She never wanted paperwork," I said, my voice sharp with bitterness. "She just expected me to hand over the keys." He leaned back in his chair. "Are you sure you want to liquidate? Once we start, there's no undoing it." "I'm sure," I answered, locking eyes with him. "This isn't about revenge, Michael." She made her intentions clear. "I'm protecting myself." He closed the folder. "Then we'll move fast. I'll draft the sale contracts, file the recall notices with the DMV and the county. You'll need to sign an affidavit of misuse." "I already wrote one," I said, sliding a folder across the desk. His brows lifted as he read. "You documented everything." "Of course I did. I may be heartbroken, but I'm not unprepared." Michael gave the smallest smile, respect flickering through his professional calm. "Then let's make this official." And just like that, I wasn't the forgotten mother tucked into the corner of her own home anymore. I was a woman taking back what was hers, with someone across the table who finally saw me clearly, and wasn't afraid to stand beside me. I walked out of his office with more than paperwork. I walked out with certainty. No more second-guessing, no more guilt dressed up as hesitation. This wasn't just about pushing Emily out. It was about ending the slow erosion of my dignity. She'd chipped away at it with every unpaid bill, every smirk, every time she dismissed me as irrelevant. That evening I sat at my kitchen table, the same one Emily once mocked as embarrassingly outdated, and opened my notebook. I wrote down every step, legal and emotional. First, liquidate the house and the car. Once they were gone, she couldn't lay claim to a single room, not even a single tire. Second, freeze the joint grocery account she talked me into opening for emergencies. I'd let it sit too long out of habit. No more. Third, close the utilities and transfer them out of my name before the sale. I wasn't going to be left paying the bills when she realized what I'd done. Fourth, secure a new home of my own choosing. Small, quiet mine. No more waiting for permission to exist in my own space. And finally, document everything. Every voicemail. Every bank charge. Every text where she begged for money under the mask of necessity. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. Not in court, not in family chatter, not even in her own mind. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. My goal wasn't to hurt her. It was to reclaim what I had built, and to make it clear that being someone's mother doesn't mean giving up your name, your home, or your self-respect. She thought I'd stay silent forever. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Emily blocked me just minutes after sending that voicemail, the one that flipped everything into motion. What she didn't realize was that deleting a message doesn't erase it. I had already saved the file, backed it up, dated and time-stamped, and forwarded it to Michael and to my personal records. Technology may keep changing, but proof still carries more weight than apologies. Her voice in that message wasn't angry, it was colder than that. Controlled. The kind of cruelty that doesn't explode, it calculates. I wish you had never been my mother, you useless woman. No stumble, no hesitation. Just finality and then silence. Michael didn't flinch when I played it for him. He simply pressed pause and said, "This supports the argument that she's voluntarily severed family responsibility. Honestly, it's stronger than I expected." Then he added the recording to the affidavit, labeling it as proof of intent. In cases like this, where someone might try to argue about future guardianship or caretaking, statements like that are heavy. Especially when they're offered unprompted and followed by complete estrangement. What Emily didn't realize was she'd given me more than an insult. She'd handed me a declaration of abandonment, one that could shield my estate from future claims. Emotional distress, imagined caregiving, you name it. It was just a breadcrumb, small but sharp. I didn't need her permission to act. I needed evidence. Evidence that would stand in a hearing, a mediation room, or, if it came to it, a courtroom. And now I had it. She thought cutting me off was power. But really it was the first page of her own undoing. I didn't cry when I replayed the message. I just saved it twice. One copy in my cloud folder, the other on a labeled USB drive, tucked into the same file with the trust papers. She could delete whatever she wanted. I was keeping what mattered. That Thursday morning I logged into the trust account portal, the one I'd used for years to pay property taxes. Still clunky, still ugly, designed for control, not convenience. I scrolled to the section marked Asset Recall Authorization and opened the clause I'd written 8 years back. In cases of unauthorized occupancy, misuse, or financial exploitation, the trustee retains full authority to revoke occupancy, liquidate holdings, and act without beneficiary consent. Every word still held. She had left town 2 days earlier, off on what she called a wellness reset. No forwarding address. No check-in. Just a scribbled note on the fridge. Gone for 10 days. Don't stress. House needs to breathe. Me too. No mention of the car. No request about insurance. Just assumption. I clicked Initiate Asset Recall for both the home and the vehicle. A little dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to proceed? I almost laughed at the irony. Yes, I was sure. I'd been sure for months, just waiting for the exact conditions to make it legal. Her disappearing act counted as abandonment. Her message counted as intent. And her financial dependence was already fully documented. My next call was to Karen, the real estate agent I trusted. I'd used Karen years ago to sell my sister's place, and she'd handled it with the grace and speed I needed now. Linda, she said the moment she recognized my voice, are we finally selling Maplewood Estates? Yes, I told her, quietly and fast. She didn't ask questions, good agents never do. When I hung up, I sank back and looked around the kitchen. The light was falling through the windows just the way Robert liked it. For months Emily had made me feel like a guest in my own home, but now everything was shifting back. Quietly, legally, completely. Emily came home 2 days earlier than she said she would. I was pruning rosemary on the patio when I heard tires crunching on the gravel. Of course her BMW was gone, picked up by the dealer 3 days before, but she'd borrowed a friend's car. He always found a way. The second she saw the empty driveway she froze, and then her eyes slid to the front door where the smart lock was flashing red. Her phone must have refused her access. She stood there, stunned, until she understood. That's when the new number called. I let it ring. It rang again. By the 4th ring I picked up. You conniving old hag. What have you done? No hello. No pretending. Just pure fury, loud and unfiltered. I executed the trust agreement, I said, calm and even. One clause you signed, one clause I drafted. You're no longer a resident. The house and car are not under your control. You can't do this, she spat. I'll sue. I'll take you to court. Everyone will know what you did. Michael had prepared me for this. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply said, Michael Turner will handle any legal threats. Direct your communications to his office. And then I hung up. She followed with long ranting texts, accusations, guilt trips, sudden confessions of love. I screenshotted every one and saved them in the file marked poster call contact. Emily. She thought she could shout me back into submission. But she wasn't the only one who had changed. The locks were more than metal. The access, the leverage, the control she thought she had, that was gone. And for the first time in years she knew it. When the shouting stopped, the sorting began. I spent 2 full days in my study with a printer, a highlighter, and a steady hand. Every transaction Emily had buried in my accounts I unearthed. Quietly, carefully, thoroughly. Bank statements showed 2 years of me covering her car insurance. I pulled the emails where she called it temporary. I printed those first. Then utilities, gas, electric, water. Everything billed to me and paid by me. Recurring charges popped up under her name for streaming services and meal kits. Things I never used, never authorized. She'd even added a second phone line to my Verizon account and labeled it Home Office. I cross-checked grocery receipts against my debit card. Imported cheeses, almond flour, detox teas. No thank yous, just quiet entitlement. Buried in a stack of unopened envelopes I found something worse. A department store statement in my name, opened last fall at Nordstrom. The balance, $3,190. I hadn't been inside a Nordstrom in years. The next morning Michael and I met. I laid the papers in front of him, organized into neat piles. Insurance, utilities, household fraud. He didn't speak for a long minute. Then he looked up and said finally, "This is beyond misuse. This is systemic exploitation." "I know," I said. She thought I wasn't paying attention. She had been counting on my silence. Michael added the receipts straight into our evidence file and began drafting a fraud complaint. I handed him the digital signature she'd likely forged, pulled from a DocuSign request I'd never even seen. At that point we weren't just proving neglect anymore. We were building a case for identity theft. Emily hadn't only taken up space and drained money, she'd been stripping me piece by piece, all while betting I was too slow to notice. The following Monday Michael ran a full credit report under my name. I expected a few more receipts, maybe another card, maybe some extra subscriptions. What I didn't expect was what he placed on the table in front of me. "Linda," he said, sliding the printout across. "It's not just Nordstrom. Another account was opened 3 months ago. High-end department store private label card. Balance, $8,412. He went on, voice flatter than usual. "She used your social, your birth date, even your email. Forged the digital signature. She didn't just steal access, Linda. She impersonated you." I stared at the statement. The charges were hers, no question. Luxury makeup, boutique clothes, even a 5-night stay at a Scottsdale resort. All billed to an address I hadn't lived in for years. All signed by someone pretending to be me. Emily hadn't just crossed a moral line or a personal one. She'd crossed into criminal. Michael didn't hesitate. He filed a fraud claim with the credit bureau immediately, attaching the forged documents and matching them against my verified signature. "She's committed identity theft," he said. "And unless she's ready to pay it back and walk away quietly, we'll report it formally." I didn't feel revenge. I felt something heavier, still solid. My daughter hadn't just taken advantage. She had broken trust at a level I never dreamed possible. She knew what this meant, what it would do to my credit, my name, my history. And she chose to do it anyway. "She thought I'd never look," I whispered. "She thought you wouldn't know how," Michael replied. "But she forgot who raised her." I looked down at the numbers, the dates, the forged signatures, and I felt something inside me settle. This was no longer a private dispute. This was a legal case. And I was done being quiet. That night I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes and silence. The walls were bare. No framed pictures, no soft lavender from the garden outside my old window. Just the faint smell of fresh paint and the low hum of the fridge. Smaller, yes, half the size of Maplewood Estates. The floor creaked in places. The kitchen window looked out onto a parking lot instead of flower beds. But it was mine. No one barged through the door. No one left dishes piled in the sink. No one criticized the way I folded towels or the volume on the evening news. The quiet was sharp at first, almost painful, but clean. And still I missed her. God help me, I did. Not this version of her. Not the woman who used my name like a credit line, who spoke to me like a burden to manage. I missed the little girl with jelly on her hands, who once asked if Santa liked banana bread. The teenager who left scribbled notes on the fridge after fights. The daughter I believed would grow into someone I could grow old beside. But grief, I've learned, doesn't always mean return. Sometimes it means release. On my counter I kept one photo. Emily at 9 years old, grinning with a popsicle in her hand, missing a front tooth. Proof that she had once existed in a time before resentment and entitlement took root. That child I had loved with everything I had. But she didn't live inside this woman anymore. And I couldn't keep pretending she did. She'd been counting on my silence, on my shame, on the way family members let things slide. Michael added the receipts to our evidence file and started drafting a fraud complaint. I handed him the digital signature she'd probably forged, pulled from a DocuSign request I never saw. We weren't just proving neglect anymore. We were building a case for identity theft. Emily hadn't taken only my space or my money. She'd been taking me apart, piece by piece, assuming I'd be too slow to notice. The following Monday, Michael pulled a full credit report in my name. I expected a few more surprises. Another card, maybe a ghost subscription. What he placed on the table stunned me. "Linda," he said, setting the printout between us, "this isn't just the Nordstrom account. Another card was opened 3 months ago. Private label, high-end department store. Balance, $8,412. He kept his voice even, but it was flat. "She used your social, your birth date, even your email. Digital signature forged. She didn't just steal access, she impersonated you." I stared at the statement. The charges were unmistakable: luxury cosmetics, boutique clothing, a 5-night stay at a Scottsdale resort. All billed to an address I hadn't lived in for years. All paid by someone pretending to be me. Emily crossed a legal line. Not just a moral one, not just a personal one. This was criminal. Michael didn't waste time. He filed a fraud claim with the credit bureau immediately, attached the forged docs and matched them against my verified signature. "She's committed identity theft," he said. "Unless she's ready to repay and walk away quietly, we'll report it formally." I didn't feel vindictive. I felt a heavy, calm stillness. My daughter hadn't merely taken advantage. She had betrayed trust at a level I never imagined. She knew what this would do to my credit, my name, my history, and she did it anyway. "She thought I wouldn't look," I said. "She thought you wouldn't know how," Michael replied. "But she forgot who raised her." That night I stood in my new apartment surrounded by unpacked boxes and a clean, unfamiliar quiet. No framed photos on the walls, no lavender drifting in from the garden outside the old bedroom window, just the faint smell of paint and the hum of the fridge. It was smaller, yes, half the size of Maplewood Estates. The floor creaked. The kitchen looked out onto a parking lot instead of flower beds. But it was mine. No one barged through the door. No one left dishes in the sink. No one criticized how I folded towels or why I watched the news too loud. The silence hurt at first, sharp as a cut, then it settled, clean, steady. And I missed her. God help me, I missed her. Not this woman who used my name like a blank check, who talked to me like a burden to manage. I missed the little girl with jelly on her fingers, asking if Santa likes banana bread. The teen who left handwritten notes on the fridge after bad fights. The daughter I pictured growing into someone I could grow old beside. Grief, I've learned, doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. I kept one photo on the kitchen counter. Emily at 9, missing a front tooth, grinning with a popsicle. It reminded me she had existed once, before entitlement and resentment took over. That child I had loved fiercely. But she didn't live in this woman anymore, and I couldn't keep pretending she did. You were 35, Michael said evenly, and the trust clause you initialed gave Linda full authority to revoke access without cause. The mediator raised his hand. Let's stay on track. This isn't about emotions, it's about facts. Emily let out a sharp breath. She wasn't used to losing control. For years she had always set the terms, always found a way to talk herself out of trouble. But not here. Not now. She couldn't cry her way through it or guilt me or charm her way out. We took our time, that mattered. Michael placed each piece of evidence on the table slowly, like it weighed more than it looked. Every page had a purpose. Every document built the wall she couldn't climb. First came the bank statements. 4 separate accounts, each showing recurring transfers from me to Emily, marked support, reimbursement, or sometimes nothing at all. 2 full years of me paying while she paraded around claiming independence. Then the insurance records. Auto health renters. None in her name. None paid by her. Michael had circled my account numbers in red ink. After that came the fraud alert, printed straight from the credit bureau. The card opened in my name, maxed out in 3 months. The charges read like her personal wish list. Hotels, spa treatments, designer clothes. Clothes she had the nerve to wear to the mediation. She leaned back, arms crossed. This is just a smear campaign. The mediator didn't even look up. He was busy reviewing the original trust clause, the one she had signed at 35, acknowledging she had no ownership, that her occupancy could be revoked without warning. Maya hadn't spoken once, but I could feel her watching Emily. Not judging, just seeing her clearly, maybe for the first time, without the family filter that always blurred the truth. Michael slid forward the final document, the title transfer. Notarized, dated, filed. The car had never been hers. The house had never belonged to her. Emily's voice cracked. She pressured me. I didn't understand what I was signing. The mediator finally looked up. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Ms. Reynolds, you were not a minor. You were not under guardianship. And you were not incapacitated. She didn't answer. She just stared at the table, fingers twitching against her sleeve. The evidence wasn't a threat anymore. It was a verdict, assembling itself 1 page at a time. The mediator took his time, flipping through each record again, making notes, highlighting lines. Occasionally he glanced at Emily, who now sat completely still. Her arms were still folded, but it looked less like confidence and more like armor. Michael stayed silent. He knew there was no need to press. We had already laid the foundation. There was nothing left to argue. Finally, the mediator set the file down and folded his hands. Based on the documentation, the trust structure is valid and enforceable. The revocation of property access and the liquidation of assets fall well within the trustee's rights. The respondent has no legal ownership claim. Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. The mediator's voice stayed steady. Furthermore, the credit card applications supported by third-party fraud reports and signature mismatches may rise to the level of criminal identity theft. The financial support provided by the trustee, contrary to the respondent's claims, was substantial and never documented as loans. That undermines any dependency defense. He closed the folder. Legally speaking, Ms. Reynolds, you have no entitlement to the home, the vehicle, or any portion of your mother's estate under the terms provided. Michael nodded once but didn't smile. This wasn't victory. This was reckoning. Emily blinked rapidly. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. So what now? I'm just cut off. The mediator didn't answer. That wasn't his place. But I did. You cut yourself off, Emily. I just made it official. For years I'd walked on eggshells around her moods, her entitlement, her threats. But in that conference room the balance shifted, not with shouting, not with punishment, but with clarity. She had always assumed no one would believe me. That I couldn't prove it. That age would make me forget or fear or falter. The neighborhood knew something had changed before I even said a word. The for sale sign outside Maplewood Estates lasted less than 48 hours. By the weekend it was gone, replaced with a quiet under contract notice. Emily's white BMW was no longer in the driveway. Her deliveries stopped showing up. And her voice, once loud across the cul-de-sac during speakerphone calls and wine nights by the pool, went silent. Of course she tried to explain it away. At the next HOA meeting she strolled in with oversized sunglasses, talking about planned downsizing, sustainability, new priorities, less materialism. But nobody believed her. Not after she'd bragged for months about remodeling the kitchen once the deed was flipped, or hinted that her mother wouldn't be around forever. People remember those things. Her boyfriend, the one she never officially introduced, the one who parked in front of my hydrangeas and treated the house like a weekend resort, disappeared within 2 weeks. No scene, no goodbye. Just gone. Her social media went dark after a single post, taking a break. Resetting. Reclaiming peace. No photos. No tags. No comments from the women who used to flood her stories with compliments about her perfect life. Maya told me later that Emily had been spotted apartment hunting. Not in Maplewood Estates. Not even the next town over. She was looking at rentals by the interstate, the same kind of places she once sneered at as sad little boxes for people who gave up. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I didn't gloat. I didn't correct rumors. I didn't owe anyone my side. The truth was already moving through the grapevine. Slow, steady, undeniable. Michael filed the formal fraud report the following Monday. No delays, no warnings. The credit bureau acted first. Her accounts were flagged and frozen. The Nordstrom card closed. The second card, the one she'd opened using a slight variation of my name, was marked for attempted identity theft. She had used C.R. Reynolds. Close enough to me. Far too close. Then came wage garnishment, 15%, the legal minimum. The paperwork was clear. Repayment of fraudulent charges, filed under elder financial abuse statutes. She didn't contest it. The dealership sale closed without issue. The BMW, her crown jewel, was gone, officially off the books. The house went next. $238,000 net after fees. Clean. Every dollar deposited straight into the secured estate account I'd restructured weeks earlier. And then came the IRS. Michael flagged the discrepancies in her tax returns. She'd claimed caregiver income that didn't match any real work. She'd even listed me as a dependent, twice. Investigators opened a file. That part would take time, but the process had started. There were no furious calls this time. No weeping voicemails. Just silence. She had built a tower on my shoulders, convinced I would never move. Now she was left trying to explain why it all collapsed without ever admitting she was the one who lit the match. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.